can I first of all apologise if you might not understand what I'm saying. Not only am I Glaswegian, but I've got the flu, so please bear with me. I think Mark really, in a lot more outstanding way than I'm ever going to be able to, has already outlined the major point. I mean, what Millbank did, what we did really at Millbank as a 52,000 strong demonstration was create a huge turning point, not only for the student and the anti-cuts movement, but for, it was a watershed in the history of protest in this country. The storming and occupation of the governing party's headquarters by thousands of angry students and workers, because there were many UCU members on that demonstration as well. It awoke a sleeping giant, a giant that's been asleep since 1990. Really, I was 18 months when we brought down Thatcher. I was 18 months old when we brought down Thatcher, and I still remember the stories that my mum and dad told me about that. And we did awaken that giant that has been asleep. And I genuinely believe that we precipitated the 600,000 or 700,000 people that marched on the street 6 months later on the 26th of March. That would not have happened if the confidence hadn't been given to the student and the trade union movement with the invasion of Millbank. I think what's more important though is that it gave confidence to an entire class. Millions of people watched those pictures, and whether or not you want to believe the Daily Mail or the Express, that it was hundreds of people, that hundreds of anarchists that smashed a window. It was thousands of people, and it was genuine class anger that people orchestrated against what they seemed to be a manifestly unfair and regressive government, and that's what that was. A generation really that was so enraged with the prospect of the futures being sacrificed for a crisis that they did not cause. I think it's this prospect, and it's prospect of what happens on the 30th of June, now that you've got Vince Cable addressing GMB meetings saying that he's going to be curtailing not only the right to protest but the right to strike. It's this kind of fear that this momentum really gains substance amongst the working class, that really strikes fear into the hearts of people like David Cameron and Nick Clegg. I think the state's reaction to crush these protests is testament to that fear. I was made a target, as Hannah said, of the right-wing media in the immediate aftermath. I was on the bus back up to Glasgow from the Millbank protest. I wasn't arrested, I wasn't stopped by any police at the demonstration because I hadn't done anything wrong, but yet on the bus back up to Glasgow, I got a phone call off my mum. This was about 4 hours after we left Millbank Tower, telling me that the Daily Mail were in my mum and dad's garden in Cumbernauld. So they not only found out where my mum and dad lived, because I've not lived there for several years, but they decided to camp out in the front garden. They stayed there for 5 days. So they wrote articles about my mum and dad. They claimed that my mum and dad had lived off benefits for 3 years. They claimed that my granddad was an ultra-left Labour councillor, which is quite hysterical just because he is repelled by Tony Blair. Apparently he's ultra-left. But this was the reaction. What came out of that, and 2 days after the Millbank protest, I was actually suspended from Strathclyde University by the principal of the university, who is the shred of Scottish education, by the way. He was on £250,000 and sacked 140 cleaners and admin staff. Several weeks after giving himself a pay rise. So this is the kind of class enemies that we're talking about, who are putting down and curtailing the right to protest. I was suspended. We essentially shut down the Senate meeting. We stormed the Senate meeting that was voting to have me suspended, and that was overturned eventually. I think the kind of main issue was 2 weeks after that, on the 24th of November, I was actually dawn raided by 5 Metropolitan Police officers. They broke down my door at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they, still in my pants obviously, read out the crime against me, which was the crime that I was supposed to have committed, which was violent disorder at the time that I was arrested for. They drove me down to Cumbria, which is completely outlandish. I'm a law student myself, and I know that is completely unheard of, to go into other countries and arrest people, and as one gentleman's already said, that is already a form of interment, to go into other countries and take them cross-border jurisdiction. So I was taken into Cumbria, down to Cumbria to a police station, and it was quite clear from the outset, because they didn't take me to London, they didn't take me to Glasgow, they were intending entirely to screw me over in the middle of England, where they assumed that I wouldn't have any lawyers, wouldn't have any representation. lo and behold, I turned up with 2 private lawyers who were just down the road in Carlisle. So fantastic comeuppance and coup for that, for them to be. So what essentially happened was I was arrested and interrogated for around 8 hours. Obviously released without charge because the only evidence they had was Daily Mail front covers and Daily Mail and BBC footage of me supposedly orchestrating the protest. You know, apparently I put within the minds of the people who did decide to smash the windows. You know, I obviously telepathically told them to commit the violent acts that they did, and for goading people to come into the building. I mean, after I was released, obviously without charge, they did take my phone, and as already been said, they've took my phone and my laptop, and after 8 months they've still refused to let that go. They're still looking at evidence within it. I mean, my case is obviously not an isolated one. We're looking at over 300 people that have been arrested in Operation Malone. Children as young as 13, has already been mentioned, have been captured and arrested and terrified on raids where they're completely illegally. Their parents are not allowed to be in the interrogation with them. I think the tables are beginning to turn. On the Daily Mail front, back in February, the PCC, the Press Complaints Commission, ruled that not only was the Daily Mail guilty of gross harassment of my parents, they forced them to print a full page, on page 3, a full page apology to my mum and dad for what they seem to be harassment. They've made a promise that they will not be reporting any more detrimentally on my case anyway. So I think we can safely say that the Daily Mail will not be reporting on the case on Friday. I mean, the Defend the Right to Protest campaign, obviously I'm a shop steward for Unite the Union, and I think the trade union movement in support of that has been fundamental. They've paid for the buses, for example, that are coming down from Glasgow on Friday to support me in my case on Friday at London Magistrates Court. But I think what needs to be kind of ironed out is the differentiation that the state are making between the good and bad protesters, and this is what Mark was saying. I mean, the persecution of violent and huge inverted commas protesters is a clear attempt to divide the movement. And I think it's a great hypocrisy. It's a great hypocrisy that's at hand, because while throwing stones and burning placards and spray painting Tory scum on Baroness Varsy's door, that's seen to be criminally violent. But yet, dragging people out of wheelchairs, braining people, fracturing the skulls of 20-year-old protesters, throwing people to the ground, innocent protesters, to their death, that is seen to be legitimate violence. That's the kind of hypocrisy that we're looking at. I think the smashing of windows at Millbank was not what was violent on that day. I think the destruction of our education system and our welfare state is what was violent. The millions left behind by these attacks, the millions left behind on the scrap heap of unemployment, they're the victims of these attacks, and that the real violent perpetrators are the Camerons and Cleggs. But I think today's political elite, I mean, we need to make this clear, today's political elite, your Camerons and your Cleggs and your Osbornes, they know exactly what criminal violence is, because of course they were in the Bullingdon Club, weren't they? They used to go about smashing up some of the top restaurants in the city, and used to get leave cheques to pay for the expenses from Daddy's trust fund. I think the fundamental difference that we've got to draw between those who chose to throw throw stones at windows at Millbank and those who smashed up the Ivy restaurant, in London, the fundamental difference is that the former is going to be left on the scrap heap, is going to have to pay for up to £18,000 a year if AC Grayling gets his way for an education, and yet the latter can pay for that education, the top education in the world, and have a gap year in between. I think fundamentally the only way to defend the right to protest is to take further direct action, and I think that's already been made clear. If we begin to differentiate between the peaceful and the state-defined violent protesters, then we're already playing into the hands of people like Cameron and Clegg. We're already dividing the movement, because every protester, I think, needs to be defended, and this is why Thursday and Friday is absolutely fundamentally important. We're outside defending everyone there. Every anti-cuts activist who wishes to see the end of this regressive government needs to be in support of these people on trial on Thursday and Friday and on the 4th of July as well. Because if the occupiers of Millbank and Fortnum and Mason lose their legal fight, then the entire anti-cuts movement is in jeopardy. Because if we lose the right to defend the right, if we lose the right to protest, then we have lost the right to defend ourselves against an ideological assault on every single one of us in this room. Without the right to protest, we would be completely defenceless against the ideological assault on our wages, our conditions and our services. So again, I would ask you to all of you to come down to the protests outside the court, both on Thursday and on Friday. Thanks very much.